Kathy Vick, deeply awake. And it's only through extraordinary circumstances that I'm in front of you right now. It is actually a little bit of a miracle. And it's further bolstered by something that was told to me yesterday. My son doesn't really talk galactically very often. And that really surprises me because he is quite, he's actually a little bit more abstracted in many ways than I am, believe it or not. That's saying a lot. But he doesn't talk about it quite as much as I do. And once in a while, though, he will tell me something. And last night he just kept going on and on about the sun and he was saying, "Well, Mom, you live in a sun," because he's visited me in my soul form, and he knows that I live in the sun and I have parties and things like that. That's how he met me, and that's why he decided to walk in, because the soul that was in my body and had intended to be born gave up the ghost, and he heard the call and came in. So, and he knows all this. He blew my mind one afternoon when he told me that, because it made perfect sense. My uh, the birth was a complicated one, and the baby didn't have a very good APGARs, meaning at birth it was about as close to stillborn as you can get. His APGARs were 1, 1, and 5. So that means that it took him 5 minutes, no, 10 minutes to show signs of life. Or 5, I forget, but it was a long time. But then he showed up. So anyway, he tells me about this sun that I hang out on. So last time we were talking about the sun, and I was saying, yeah, well, there is a group of individuals who have done their research and who really pretty much understand that the whole thing is done in about 200 years. There actually is a time limit on all this. And he looked at me like I was nuts and said, for somebody who's as wise as you, I cannot believe you think like that. I said, I don't think that way. I just know that some people do. And it sort of resonates with some of the creation story I've been told. So whatever, I don't know. I'm open to it. And he just went, fi, fi, he didn't like that. But anyway, in the course of all of this galactic nonsense we were talking about, he said that he has access to thousands and thousands of lives. And he said there's a door you pass, and then after that, everything's available to you. I didn't counter that with, yeah, I know. I just listened. And he said, you don't understand that what you're writing is really, really important to more people than you know. So you have to keep going. And that's kind of why I'm here, in a way. That and the eclipse. And then today's falderall. I got to see the moon last night. And the solar eclipse was very profound for me. And I think for a lot of people, I think that I've seen a change in countenance in people, just a lightening of things. And I think with the planets being direct, this is a huge energetic time celestially. This is just, the gifts are so exquisite. And it's, when alignments are this in your face, it's really totally appropriate to think that maybe a message is being sent, that maybe we're actually cooperatively having something happen here. With the solar eclipse at the beginning of the month, with Pluto conjunct the sun, it just was so in Capricorn. What that means to me is that the sun was illuminating, was shining into the underworld. The lights went on with that eclipse. And in the house of tradition, within the mentality of let's keep everything the way it has been, while striving for more. But that's quite a curious tension, to be a traditionalist who's goal-oriented. That's a tricky one. And now this one. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own astrology, in the hopes that it'll encourage you to look at your natal chart. That's all. And also, I guess, to communicate the peace that this particular study has provided me through an entire lifetime. And the study is, I think of it as if one is an artist. Well, as a child, one starts with color books, don't they? And with, I don't know, with just paper and crayon. And perhaps the drawings and doodles are primitive, but they give peace and joy to the doodler, and hopefully the doodler doesn't get any criticism and just keeps going for it. Soon enough, those doodles become a bit more refined, and as the fine motor coordination comes in, and then the synthesis of mind and heart and spirit come online, well, great art can be produced. And I kind of think of that with things that I wasn't very sophisticated with before. All right, I was just doodling. I'm allowed. I'm not supposed to know everything, and that's really how our evening concluded, my son and I, because I had just had a random thought, and he had mentioned it, and so we discussed it. How funny it is that if we knew everything, if we truly had full access all the time to everything in the flesh, how much fun would it be? The veil is fun. The veil makes it fun. The veil is a requirement of linear reality. It's a trick because time is simultaneous. It's our bodies, it's our brains that sequence it in a way that we then use to interpret things. So that was really fun. I want to talk about the eclipse that happened last night, though. Finishing up the solar eclipse was this beautiful blood moon. And I got to see it last night. It was very dramatic. And by the time I got home, it was blood red. So I took Sam out and held his hand, and we looked up at the moon, just to anchor it, just to honor it. And it was kind of spooky, and it was really pretty. We saw it through the trees, through a hole in the trees. Ooh, so pretty. And this morning, everything is different. I mean, in the physical. And, I could look at the circumstances I find myself in this morning and lament and beat myself up and have a cow. And I'm not, because I can see bigger. And so it's just a hoot to me that circumstances this morning happened one after the other, and I could have been upset, but I can see the purpose and the sense in it all. I can see how my resistance and unwillingness had to create circumstances that I find myself in today. And what's beautiful is that I have people in my life who are helping me. So I'm aware now of what I need to do, and I'm a bit unwilling, as always, but I'm learning that it's really okay to just keep going, even if I'm unwilling. If I know it's what my soul is requiring of me, then it's to my benefit to work through that unwillingness. Not by sitting on my chair and thinking it through, but by working it through. For me, this has been a process of such profound transformation that I'm realizing now that I everything has been always in divine order, and that I have not been doing anything wrong at all. The only way that I've slowed it down is by resisting. And so I want to talk a little bit about resistance, although I do want to revisit the natal chart. So let me do that first. It was just recently that I came across an article that talked about the vernal axis and the galactic gate. There's in astrology and astronomy, there is a gate, I guess, or a continuum. On one side is the gate of man, and on the other is the gate of God, I think it is. And this gate has to do with the Milky Way as you look up in the sky. And the axis for that, the numbers are 5 degrees of Pisces, Virgo. And that was mine. That was the natal chart. My sun was 5 degrees Pisces, conjunct my south node. So my north node conjunct my ascendant in Pluto. Well, that was 5 degrees Virgo. That's that gate. And then I read some more, and I found out that there's another axis. It's the axis to the galactic center. And that axis is 5 degrees Gemini, 5 degrees Sagittarius. And in my new natal chart from May 25th of 2012, when I had a very, very big spiritual event, that natal chart is on that axis with my sun at 5 degrees Gemini, conjunct, once again, my south node. Superimpose those two, and you'll see the galactic cross. And something shifted in me when I saw that. It's funny how attainment or realization or peace comes after a series of incremental decisions, any of which, had they not been made that way, would have rendered the outcome null and void. This is what always fascinates me. To get here, I had to have done so much right. But at the time, well, it appeared like madness. This morning, I could see myself more clearly. As I was driving home and looking at the moon, I made my declarations. I realized finally what I needed to request, what I wanted to relinquish. It has got nothing to do with anything but what is happening inside. As within, so without. As above, so below. So, I'm excited, determined, and finally willing. Part of the trouble I had was I was reconciling a whole lot of dark, and being surrounded by it on all sides and having it inside of me. Well, that's a tricky one. If I'm a child of light and a child of God and all that stuff that I know is true, that I'm so in love with God, and I love things that I can't explain, and well, then there was a lot of darkness about. What's helped is for me to remember the training. I was here to be a light in dark places, and I oftentimes just lost my way and thought I was dark too. So it brings up, I don't know if you've seen the Matrix movies, but I, in a few fallow hours this weekend, watched that trilogy again. And I'd gotta say, that third movie is the one I like the most. And in the end, I keep going back to that last scene when Agent Smith is finally in a position to overtake Mr. Anderson. And finally, Mr. Anderson says, yes, it was inevitable. And the darkness is injected within his body and consumes him, consumes Mr. Anderson. And for a moment, Agent Smith, the antagonist, who has overcome his enemy, thinks he's won. But in that movie, the hero, Mr. Anderson, is plugged in. He's plugged in to light, to the source, as he's doing battle with his nemesis, Agent Smith. Agent Smith can't even begin to comprehend this. He doesn't know. The battle is assured. And once Mr. Anderson has morphed into a representation of Mr. Smith, replicating that darkness in his physical form, it's then that Mr. Anderson blasts that form with light from the inside out. And with that, as Agent Smith looks on and watches his own breaking apart, he realizes it's over. He too will be consumed with and by this tremendous light of source. The Matrix is not science fiction. It's a documentary. So, it's been a very big time. And I walk around a lot of the time now in such gratitude for having done my work. At the time it was hard, and I got a lot of shit for it. I didn't understand myself, and so I didn't even know how to interact with people a lot of the time. And I had a hard time not fitting in and really wanting to fit in, and also really not wanting to fit in. There were so many parts of my psyche that were split and doing battle, light and dark. I have grown in thankfulness and appreciation for the lessons I've learned, and for the hardships I endured, and for the strength that I came in with. And death, as far as a motif, it's still always around. I don't think that that's something that ever goes away. But what I've been trying to do with it is death has always been around me. It's not anything that I feel uncomfortable with. But thinking about my own demise or my own body in a way that portrays it as ill is something that I'm working at, because I think that it's just a using the body as a way to express anxiety or fear or resentment or any of those things. The body's being used as a circuit breaker. And I really don't want to use my body that way. I would prefer it if I was more honest about how I felt. But honesty is not a moral character. Honesty is, for me, a representation of the highest perspective available to me at any given time. There's always more. And the more you learn, then the things that you knew to be true that got you to this new place, you can see were perhaps not as advanced as where you are now. And so again, it's through these increments. This is why, for me, it's never made sense to keep my eye off the ball of my soul. I don't really think about spirit, and I don't really think I think about soul. And for a long time I called my guidance them or they. And then sometimes I would call it my team, because there's a lot of them. No, it's my soul. And my soul is vast. It individuates for me as human beings with their own will and their own purpose and their own trajectory. It presents as saints and gurus and saviors and wise ones. And it lives in me through my ability to harness, express, and transmute energy. I'm beginning to realize who and what I am. Just beginning. But it feels really good. So now I'm gonna go uh, do some things that are quite unexpected and make me laugh out loud. And I know for somebody else, they'd be, apoplectic and enraged, and others would be all nervous and upset. And me, yeah, of course it would wind up being this. Of course. It's the only thing that makes sense. So I bring this, I'm not going to give you the details of what's going on, but what I'm telling you is that uh, from now until whatever, the effects of an eclipse, and especially of a set like this, can go on for months. So if something comes into your life that is like the last thing that you wanted, but if you're super honest, is the only freaking thing that you wanted, you were just too, I don't know, cowardly or lazy or disorganized or whatever to make it happen, to bring it in and live it. Well, enjoy the after effects of an eclipse. I see an eclipse always as it's God closing its eyes and opening. And it's sort of like, all right, you guys, it's all washed clean. It's brand new after this eclipse. Tell me what you want. Like that. So, I've used the eclipse like this since, well, for always, but really intently from 2016 forward, using my natal charts, understanding that the pretty picture that you see represented as a natal chart, that's a snapshot of where the planets were when you were born. Kind of important. Worth a bit of study, I would think. And if you do decide to study it, yeah, I've never gone to I've gone to 2 astrologers for readings. That means I've gotten 2 astrological readings in my life. The rest of this has all been study, and it's incremental. I've learned a lot about astrology, and it's fueled, I guess, not only by wanting to understand my own nature, but other people's nature. It began by wanting to know, ooh, what's Scorpio like? Ooh, tell me how does a Capricorn behave? How is so and so in what would they be like as a lover or whatever? And then what's this about me? I want to know about me. And then from there, it just got more and more intense over the years. But I think it would be really good to actually go to a teacher someday. That's my phone. The day's beginning. I hope you have a really good one, and I hope the eclipse finds you well and happy and peaceful. I hope that the changes that come upon you are gentle, and if they're not, that you don't beat yourself up. If reality's already given you a beating, don't beat yourself up too. And how about just imagining that what you think is reality beating you up, maybe that's just your team. Maybe that's just your soul. Noticing a window of opportunity, reaching in and saying, I gotcha. Don't worry, I gotcha. For me, in my house, that's what's always going on. The suffering comes when we forget. Simply put, when we forget. All right. That's all I have to say today. Make it a good one. Say